Well, I mean,
Arthur's made a
here.
special trip, I guess.
He has to be here for
Gonna
other
fly
stuff.
in.
No,
Yeah.
He's here for other stuff also.
All these lifestyles of the rich and famous, I tell you. I
Heard all
hear
about
you.
that
1 out of 2 weeks.
that thing on the home channel. The guy that does the bike committee. Bridges, Jason Bridges on TV the other night. It's all staged.
Who? Remember, I wasn't here.
Okay, never mind. Just, yeah.
Catherine is
Who was he
turning
on?
it over.
Whose show was he on?
HGTV,
No.
it's like on like cable.
Pharmacist.
No,
I forget.
was it, I know that's our local
Oh,
show.
no,
No, it's really
no,
is-
No, this is
thanks.
like a home network.
Yeah, no.
Is it through cable? One of the
I don't
cable
mind.
things you have to do?
You would, it's fine,
Out
we'll
of
just
your
go and
cable.
watch tonight.
No, thank you.
But it's based in Boston. It's the Boston channel.
It's a
I should have brought some. I could go down
station
there.
in England.
You're
It's a
welcome
nation,
to
right?
use it.
I think.
And was he on
That's where
because
it's
of the bike thing?
That's, no.
Buying a house.
Has nothing to do with, well, no.
Go
Nothing
look
too
at the house.
That's
It was kind of cool. But then I found out yesterday it was staged.
How's that, Catherine? You're just warming up there.
All that stuff
You
is
didn't buy any of those houses. All right. Okay. Signatures, we really need all that.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for showing up this evening. I do appreciate it at this point. The first thing that we're going to get into is, besides the approval of agenda and half a second, are the public hearings of the warrant articles, so we'll kind of march through that. I've just been informed of one thing by staff, which is the third one, the zoning map change for Fairgrounds Road in the vicinity of Newtown Road does need to be re-advertised. So we will not be closing the hearing on that tonight, but we will start taking testimony. Board members, you have an agenda before you at this point. I take a motion to approve said agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. So for the warrant articles for the upcoming town meeting, hard to believe that's coming up. But anyways, first one is the zoning map change from commercial industrial to commercial neighborhood for a single property at 3 Shad Bush Road. Mr. Warser.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make this
Yes.
clear, that our hearing tonight is only for the citizen articles that have been
Correct.
submitted. We have other hearings that will be scheduled later for the planning board sponsored articles, which we'll be discussing in further detail on the 12th.
Thank you for
So these are
mentioning
just citizen articles,
that.
so.
Thank you for mentioning that, sir.
The first article submitted by Catherine, who's here, to change commercial industrial to commercial neighborhood for a single property. This is at 3 Shad Bush Road. Just so the board knows, and I did have a brief conversation with Catherine today, is that generally the problem with this article, it creates a potential for a spot zone. So we think that a better way to deal with this and get to the same outcome is to include funeral home within the industrial district in our use chart. So that's our recommended approach on this. But that's where we are at this point.
Okay. Catherine, do you have anything you'd like to say? Yeah.
So in
Board
the
members?
motion, put it where?
So on this particular citizen article, we would have a negative recommendation, and you would probably put a comment that the intent of this has been covered in another article, which would be our change to the use chart, which we'll develop for
Are
you.
we doing any other changes to the CI chart?
There's other changes to
Like
the use,
housing
chart.
stuff?
Yes,
But this-
there is.
Do
Good.
we need to close the public hearing on this and do that?
That would,
Yes.
that would be
All right, I'll
appropriate.
make a motion to close the public hearing on this.
Second.
Just- All right, so the motion's made and seconded. Was there anyone else? I just want to
Oh.
be sure, okay. So that motion's appropriate, made and seconded. Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Those opposed?
I'll
ayes.
make a recommendation that it be a negative recommendation based on the fact that this item will be covered in a separate warrant article from the planning board.
Okay. Do I hear a second to that?
Second.
Discussion, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. Next thing is a zoning map change from R10 to residential commercial for properties at 40 and 42R Sparks Ave. Andrew or Leslie?
Mr. Chairman, again, this article is submitted by Catherine Stover, and we had a brief discussion on it today. I know that when Catherine was preparing this, there was a little confusion. Catherine was on her way out, and I was looking at different things. R10
Bless you.
Bless you. The R10 zoning district does allow a funeral parlor
That's not,
A special permit.
by special permit.
that's,
So, and the
Hold
RC
on, we need to
district is ultimately a district that we're working to phase out. The difference is that a funeral home is allowed by right in the RC district, so that's the only difference here.
this is a little, hold on, Anna, it's a little confusing because we have all of them in here. We don't have ours pulled out of this whole pile.
Yeah.
And I can't find it. That's not helping me at all. In fact, I don't believe I ran into something else first. I ran into another zoning map amendment for North Water Street. Did I pass the one I was supposed to find?
That's the,
Yeah, I
that's
can't
a,
find it.
that's a CN one,
Yep, I've got that. That's the next.
CDT one.
I can't find it. This is, if we're gonna be doing zoning stuff, Catherine needs to give us just the zoning stuff. This is nuts. I couldn't figure out why the packet was so big. Now I know.
Anyways, all right.
Well,
What am
Mr.
I
Chairman,
looking for?
that is the intent of the article.
Right.
You know,
Andy,
I-
what you thinking on this? Because that area
Change it.
is, we have other issues with commercial versus residential on Sparks Ave now. Do we have, is everything changed on that side of the road that needs to be? Like the Cumberlands and,
Well, at this point, this is a transitional, this will be a transitional lot between, you have the Nantucket Auto Body on one side, you have the, what would be either the road extension or the cemetery on the other side. So, I think it's a reasonable,
but don't we have another district that we want to use instead of RC?
it would be commercial mid-island, but we haven't created that yet. So, my feeling is that,
So
I
it's
think
like
a special.
CDT, but for Mid-Island kind of thing that you're trying to do.
Right, I think that the existing R10 district, which allows it by special permit, I think is reasonable.
Okay.
It's a site that I think lends itself well to the use, but there may be conditions that the board may want to put on it. So I'm sort of hesitant to expand the RC district further, but
Yeah.
again, it's up to you all. I think the R10,
We don't want to create a district that we're going to get rid of eventually.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense because we're trying to get rid of RC. We already went through this at Brant Point. So if we haven't done a Mid-Island one yet, then this is still allowed, so we should come up with it next year's town meeting, or what are we trying to do?
well, I think if we're going to cut, if, again, it's allowed in this district now, and that we were concerned that it could have been in R40, which is, the actual cemetery itself is in R40, and that wouldn't be allowed. But it is still in R10, confirmed that today, so it's allowed by special permit. If it moves forward and is established, when we finally do the rezoning of the whole area, it could all go into the same CMI district. But I think at this point, it's reasonable to
Just leave it.
to leave it.
Tell me again, it's not in my packet, on top of it. Tell me again which lot this is, the one to the right of Auto Body?
Norms.
To the right of the auto body,
Is
and
that
the
the
one
one-
behind it, which are
Okay,
both in
Which then
R10,
backs up to First Way. The one behind it
Cow Pond.
does.
to Cow Pond.
Cow Pond. And this is the one where we wanted to go, this includes that piece where we wanted to go through?
Correct.
Okay.
Here. It's right here.
I don't know why I don't have it in here.
It really doesn't, looking at the article is not going to tell you much more than what's on the page.
No.
So, Carl?
So we might as well stick with R10.
I think that's reasonable. It gets to the same place. It allows the funeral home to be established.
Okay.
Catherine, do you have anything that you'd like to offer to us at this stage?
I am on your guidance.
Okay.
You okay, you understand what we're saying, though, right? What Andrew's saying about this?
So, I'm all in a special permit
I mean,
Yeah, I think it would be
couple
one or
of
two
public
hearings. I don't think it's a long.
Couple of public hearings.
It's a long process.
Yeah, but so,
If that was what ended up being the land that was potentially, used, be a couple. And it's not gonna be like the tennis club, was.
I don't think anything.
Probably at a minimum, Catherine, about 3 months' worth of time, one hearing each month, just to give you a feel for where that would wind up. Maybe might be 1 month shorter than that, it might be a bit longer, depending upon public testimony and any other things that kind of drop out of that. Mr. Reed?
I was just thinking that this would be a planning board special permit on the basis that it's in the MIPOD, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Is there any chance of the connecting road from Bacchus Lane resurrecting itself in the next foreseeable future to connect to in front of D&D Auto there? Or is that not on the table anymore?
It's, the road issue has never been completely removed, so it's always a possibility. It has been at least talked about in the school discussions. So it could exist with it. It's, the zoning line would be at the center line of the roadway, which is how anything would be treated. So they don't cancel each other out. So.
Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on this? The pleasure of the board.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. And what would you like to
This
do?
would be a motion to endorse,
No.
support, make favorable recommendation.
Remain in R10.
It would be a similar motion to your last one. It would be a negative report
Negative.
because you
Well,
found that.
this is a, private person doing this, yeah. I'll make a negative recommendation, and the matter will be dealt with elsewhere.
It's allowed by special permit.
It's a negative recommendation because you're finding that it's already
Already
allowed through
there.
special permit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. Are we clear on that then?
Yes.
So that motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you.
And we're skipping the next one.
No, we're not. We're gonna hear
Oh.
it tonight. It'll
I'm
get
sorry.
re-advertised, but we just need to leave the public hearing open tonight to be able to facilitate this. So this is a change from R10 to CN, Commercial Neighborhood, for properties on the northwest side of Fairgrounds in the vicinity of Newtown Road. Mr. Reed, I believe.
Representing the proponent of the article, Irvin Fred Holgate, who has property over in there that along Fairgrounds Road that he has been frankly attempting to sell, and there isn't a great deal of interest in buying residential property along that, granted the fact that on this side of the street all along, directly opposite, you have the town's activities in this building, the proposed potential fire station, whatever happens ultimately with the two fairgrounds parcel and the rest of the property. And accordingly, it would seem that having a low intensity, a low level of commercial activity, which is what CN basically is, along that strip of land would be an appropriate way of having effectively would be a buffer between the town's activities on this side of the street and the residential properties behind. It would run between Old South Road and the fairgrounds and fairgrounds restaurant, and would end at that point.
Okay. Andrew or Leslie? I'm sorry. Did you have anything you wanted to on this one?
One thing that we did ask Mr. Holgate, and he submitted, was some sort of evidence that the neighbors supported this. And he did submit at least a document that had the majority of those people supporting it. I did hear from Mr. Hughes, who was not here at a chance meeting, who said that they were not in favor of it. So
Right.
He signed it.
I know,
Beside the point.
yeah.
Nantucket.
So anyway, don't since this is going to be reheard, and maybe that at least issue could get straightened out,
Yeah.
whether they're in favor or not.
And if I may, wasn't this before us beforehand in some fashion or
Not this
iteration?
one.
There was a much larger proposal for C-Tech
Yeah, okay.
in an area to the west of, or southwest of this, yeah. That was not connected
Oh,
with
Gray
this.
Avenue,
That was
last year.
Vanessa's.
Right, and what was the, I'm sorry, just refresh. my
That was
memory.
not supported.
It was not supported.
I think the issue here is that we've looked at what we would change the 2 Fairgrounds Road, the town property to, and CN is a district that we've considered, and this would match across the street, so.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd be really concerned if the Hugheses were not in favor of this, since they own that whole strip right down to Fred's. I believe there's another whole gate in between, but they own the corner, and Geesley owns the next one over. I'd be really concerned if somehow we drew a line around them just to cover Fred's. That's not stuff we normally do. So I think somebody needs to have a conversation with the Hughes family, because they've got like 5 or 6 lots right in that whole little pod.
Anyone else? Just, Mr. Reed, I think you've been to enough town meetings, as have I, where we see a lot of these citizen articles turn on the fact of who shows up.
Oh, yeah.
And certainly, I would encourage through you to make sure your clients are maybe here at our next meeting or have letters of support, as well as definitely some sense that they will show up at town meeting to, and we don't mind supporting certain things, but I think it's important as well, too, that there be that concerted effort.
Right, Mr. Holgate is in Florida right now.
Okay.
But in any event, I think that the concept here is clear. And obviously, at town meeting, I understand how that will work at that time. But I don't know if it'll be feasible for him to be around between now and then or not.
Yeah, I think by our next meeting, I think what would be helpful for us is to get some letters of support as well, too, just to get a sense of where we're tracking to here. If as a board, we're going to try to support this. So I just pro-offer that to you.
I would encourage you to just consider, though, the practicalities of the situation, and the fact that if you've got what is generally perceived as an intense use over on this side of the street,
Sure.
which may be becoming more intense, that's a little inconsistent with a residential use directly across the street, and that CN may be a good way to handle that situation. You also have the commercial use of the Fairgrounds restaurant on that side, and other nearby commercial uses along Old South Road that would make this fit in very well to a CN concept. Again, I think obviously we're trying to do this to help out Colgate.
Sure.
But I think it is a proposal that makes sense. I would hope that we probably would have a majority of the neighbors supporting it. I don't think you ever get a situation in which, very rarely, all the neighbors support anything that has the name change attached to it, whether it's logical or not. So I would encourage you to get past the idea of one neighbor against it. I don't even know where the users really stand on the thing, to veto it.
I mean, I'm not remotely suggesting that one neighbor could change the course of events at this point, but I think we've found that with other citizens' articles that we've supported in the past, when we're there as a planning board supporting it, and the crickets are chirping beyond that, the proponents who wanted to do that show up at town meeting.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
we
that's
know how it works.
So I'm just kind of broadcasting that way in advance of, we would, if we're going to run that ball, we would love the support as well, too, because it makes such a big difference. Yeah, go ahead.
I got to tell you, I'm still concerned. Out of the 12 that we have in here, we have 4 out of the 12 on the warrant article. And you said he brought in other letters of support from some of the other in the 12?
Well, he had acknowledged that there was at least opposition from Linda
Linda Holgate,
Holgate and her mother.
uh-huh,
And,
the Hugheses.
well, at the time, he did not indicate that the Hugheses were opposed. And like I said, I had a very chance meeting with the son.
Oh, Geesley.
Yeah. No, not Geesley.
George?
Charles Jr. or
George or Jimmy
George,
is
septic
like-
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who said that they were concerned. So I don't know if there had been miscommunication or if there had been some changing of minds or whatever, but
Well, I'll
Again.
take it back again. You can't just say one neighbor, Arthur. The Hughes family owns at least 5 lots. All the kids have a lot there. She's got Wee Whalers there. They've got their own house there, Geesley's house, George's house, one of the other kids' house. They own a rental house that appear to be on this list for change. And then you got Linda Holgate, who's the next one over before you get to Freddie's. Or the one right after it. I can't remember which side she is on Fred's. But that concerns me. We can't just say one neighbor is opposed if all the Hugheses, at this point, we don't know for sure, but if all those Hugheses who own a majority of the property in here are not in favor of this, I have a hard time supporting this. I understand Fred's problem because he's been dealing with it for several years now, since they built this building. But I've got a problem unless we can work out this Hughes issue, because they own at least, a substantial portion of the properties that are on this list that are going to be affected, and they're going to be directly affected even if they're one lot next to it. So I'm where I'm headed at the moment.
Well, it's an issue we can deal with.
Yeah.
Yep. Board members, do you have anything
Andrew, I
else?
just have a question for you. What would we be doing over here, if this was a planning staff article? Let's just say 2017, 2000, whatever. What would we be doing? Because you got Ackeye, right? What's his zoning?
see ya.
Yeah, okay. Easy, just relax. So, the house around the corner is that in residential, or is that CN? The next house, when you're just starting to turn onto Fairgrounds?
That's CN as well.
It is in CN.
Yes.
Now, what's the little snafu with CN about the dwelling as the secondary use, or something? We went
The
through this
key
with
is-
the whole Brant Point thing last year.
The key is with these commercial districts is, as part of the master plan and as part of planning objectives that have been voted, we have commercial areas that prioritize commercial
Yeah,
use.
no, I have no problem with that.
So-
I'm just asking what.
There are
I wanna
residential-
refresh myself.
There are residential options, but they are allowed in mixed-use contexts, not clearly.
So how far would you want
Non-conforming.
to? So how far would you want to go? Let's just say that we were doing the article, had nothing to do with Freddie Holgate, and he came to you and said, I got what we'd like to do on this corner instead of it being a citizen article, which gets confusing
Yep.
with neighbors. It does, and we've seen this a million times. Would you be going up to the bus stop, for example, with CN, kind of and stopping? That's what I kind of think you'd be doing.
We're going all the way to the fairgrounds.
I know that the article doesn't.
Can-
I'm talking about
can-
what staff did it.
Can we let staff answer the question?
That's what
since
I'm
you've
trying
directed
to
it
ask you.
them?
I'm just trying to get a better vision of what we'd be doing if this wasn't a citizen article versus what we would be looking at with changing things across the street from here.
Well, I think we would acknowledge the fact that there is the restaurant, there's already commercial use on that side of the street. We would look maybe
It's
around
way away
that.
from this, Ackeye is a long way away from Fairgrounds Restaurant.
Well, the intervening area, at least on the town property, would probably go into some sort of, again, if we pursued the commercial neighborhood,
Yeah.
it might be an article that we propose together.
Yeah.
So, and maybe it wouldn't include all the properties on that side of the street, but might include a core group of properties,
I
which
mean, I
may
understand having
include.
trying to get a mixed use because it's already sort of started, but it's complicated because once, the public needs to know what CN does. We ran into the same thing. I just don't want to see this happen again like it happened at Brant Point Inn. All hell broke loose because no one understood about the secondary use thing in North Water Street, Andrew. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I'm saying. I think that there needs to be more work done through staff, and I think we need, my personal opinion is we need to come back with something more clear for this area next year. That's what I think. That's just one member.
Go ahead.
I'm also concerned about throwing every one of these properties into pre-existing nonconformity. That's not what we're supposed to be doing either. Because some of these are never going to become commercial, and we're throwing 4 or 5, 6, probably 7 or 8 lots into nonconformity out of the 12 for one person. So I'm having a big problem with that, because zoning is not supposed to create nonconformities. Over time, we're supposed to, and what guys have been doing for years, is correcting nonconformities and having zoning match the underlying uses, which are all residential on that side of the street. So I understand Fred's issue, but is there perhaps at some point, I agree with Barry, do this, or Nat, do this at some other time and not this, is to come up with, would Village Neighborhood do it, or what do the other ones do it? There's a whole lot of customary home occupations, I still use that word, that would work on those lots. So they're not prohibited from doing a home occupation over there.
No.
And I don't think Fred really understands that either. The general public doesn't get the difference between a commercial neighborhood and home occupation, which has a long list of stuff you can do. So I don't think he gets that either. But I'm not willing to throw a bunch of people into nonconformity for one lot. That's counterproductive and it's counter-planning. So I think that's where I am at the moment.
And also, Fairgrounds is 372
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
as well.
Oh, 60s.
Kimmett's.
Yeah.
If the town builds residential housing on the rest of the property up to Tacoma, on the police station side, this side, 2 and 4 would be commercial or intense use here, and the 2 Fairgrounds property. But the rest of it going up to Tacoma and Fairgrounds Restaurant across the street would be residential, and then all the way down to Ockeye would be residential. So it's an interesting area here, I think, to consider that the only 2 real heavy commercial uses would be 2 and 4, and then if the town builds housing up here in the woods, then everything surrounding these 2 properties is residential. So I'm just thinking, well, maybe it's 2 commercial properties, number 2 and number 4, and then the rest of it's residential. But I understand Mr. Holgate's frustration probably, but it's kind of surrounded by residential, especially if the town builds the rest of this out in the future to residential.
Mr. Chairman, could I just, and that's true, it might be, and the town is looking now, it may be apartment-type residential. Again, that, the CN lends itself towards that. So it is a choice to make. I mean, and the future would be that you are extending commercial or introducing commercial in this section of Fairgrounds. So you have to think about whether that's a good idea or not.
I think it is.
So-
I just think that, I think it is, Andrew. I just think that when we've gone through this, I mean, we've had so much success with zoning, flushing it out with the neighbors, you know, having public hearings so they understand what we're doing, like what happened at Pine Tree and Mary Ann years ago. When you get these local issues with locals that are trying to do something like this, but then others aren't either in agreement or understand what it means, we have to make sure that we have this clear, okay? And as far as, I agree with what I was just actually thinking about what Kyle said about the housing as well that we're doing. It's not all commercial that the town is doing. So we need to, I think we need to develop something that, even if it is different pieces of CN in some parts stay residential, Andrew. You know what I mean?
Right.
So what? That's fine, but as long as everybody understands what CN does, I don't want to see us make a mistake, have a big discussion at town meeting, and then 5 years later we're trying to change it. You know? So.
Yep.
I don't know what's between Fred's property and Fairgrounds Restaurant. Is he the immediate abutter? Or is Linda in between
There's a
them?
little place there.
David Donald's old house is right there.
Yeah, that's right.
And a
I'm just
vacant lot.
wondering if it makes more sense, because we do have that in the master plan, which alleviates the threat of spot zoning to some extent. if it wouldn't make more sense to come from the other direction. Fairgrounds, Dunham's, Fred's. That's it. Until we can get everybody else on board. And just come that direction, but you didn't include Fairgrounds in this article?
I think it is in there.
It is.
What, it is?
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering if that would be more of an immediate solution, and that might work.
I mean, that would be fine as far as we're concerned, obviously.
I mean, changing the article,
Well,
modifying
no, just
it a little
reducing
bit.
the article to go Fairgrounds,
Yeah.
Dunham, Fred,
It's within the scope of the
And that's it.
article. so
Yeah.
those parcels
because
are
everybody knows the
all-
Fairgrounds is already there. We just reduce it down to those three and let him, keep everybody else out of it.
It's three properties, you've got existing commercial activity in one of them. I think that you wouldn't run into a spot zoning.
So I think we might want to look at that when it comes back.
We can carry this over, maybe Andrew.
We
Yep.
have to,
Okay, good.
as we re-advertise.
Oh,
Is there
that's
anyone
right,
else in the
that's
audience
right.
who'd like to
Yeah.
comment on this? All right, board members,
I'll make a motion to put it over to,
so the 12th is
where
it?
am I going? No, you have to
Oh, well.
re-advertise.
We have to re-advertise.
Sorry.
So,
Special
since we
meeting.
haven't picked a date to discuss warrant articles, why don't you continue it to the February 9th regularly
Okay.
scheduled meeting? We'll
Perfect.
advertise it for that.
That's my motion.
Second,
Discussion?
sorry.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please say
Aye.
aye.
All right.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Thank you.
Good, don't be right around, too.
Next one is the zoning map change from limited commercial to commercial downtown for properties at 7911 North Water Street. Andrew or Leslie?
This is kind of the last
Sure, Mr. Chairman, you heard a similar article, was it,
one. Last year.
it was last year.
Yeah,
It was last
it was last year.
Yeah.
So these are properties that are currently in the limited commercial district. Limited commercial is a district we are phasing out. We are working on a warrant article. The recommendation from the Brant Point Association, which then was not supported,
Right.
was to change it to the commercial neighborhood. And what we're looking at is really most of it would go to the old historic district. These particular owners would still like to remain in the commercial downtown district. I think they're the theater and some of the other
Yeah.
recent projects, they feel like they would like to be part of that subset of properties.
Isn't it the theater, Periwinkle, the other inn, and Brass Lantern?
Right.
Just that group.
Skull, Periwinkle, and Brass Lantern, I represent them, so it's all,
Yeah,
okay.
there's just those three, and they're already commercial.
that's right. They're all pre-existing, non-conforming.
Yeah, it's when we kept going down the street and down the other street, and
Yeah.
all that stuff that
People
caused the
started
problem.
freaking out.
But also part of the ROH, we were going to add guest houses
Right.
and inns, transient residential facilities as an allowed use by special permit in the ROH. So that way they can do whatever they want.
Within a certain distance, and we have that article
Yeah,
which
they're
we will
coming.
discuss with you. But this group wants to go to the commercial, correct?
Have you had anything negative pop up from the abutters to these three?
Yes, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, just to fill you in. The main reason why they want their residential downtown,
Commercial downtown.
commercial downtown is, as opposed to the RH, it's an allowed use, and it also eliminates the parking issue. And I think
Yes.
The parking for these inns is somewhat of a nightmare. And so we think it's a better fit.
Oh, they're thinking special permit.
Yeah.
You don't have to
and
tell, you can tell us
They
if you
still
want.
need a special permit, but they would
You don't have to put
they have to
waivers.
deal with the parking.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
The other thing, so you end up with, you're starting at the commercial downtown now, and then you slide down, and it's just these three inns, and then the next house is Dr. McNabb and his wife Barbara, I think. And I spoke to them, and they were comfortable with this. We went through what it meant, and he said it was fine with that, as long as it stopped at his line, that he didn't want it to hit him, but he was fine with the inns.
I thought he was closer to town than they are.
No, he's the next.
Is he the
house
next block down? He's C Street.
Yeah.
He abuts the Brass Lantern, which is the
Okay.
furthest from the center of town.
Because that was an issue for him last year.
So we could make a positive on this one, Andrew, you think, and not have to continue this one?
Right, the only thing I'm not clear about is if you have to have the supermajority to allow this, if it's the same,
Oh, God.
it was,
All
It's
right.
not the same article, no.
it's not the same?
Well, last year, the article included the whole block,
Oh, it's much
between,
bigger. It was huge.
Well, all the way
those
down to
streets.
the Nantucket.
They went to
C
C
Hotel.
Street, Mark Parker's property.
Yeah, it wrapped
kept going, the
around.
Butterworths were in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were all in here for that.
Yeah.
Because we had a much larger area because LC goes down Easton Street and everything else over there.
Would you be more comfortable just waiting a meeting on this, just to make sure that we're within scope issues?
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
it's fine. I am just concerned that whether you need the
Yeah.
repetitive petition,
Right.
whether that,
It's not identical.
I know it's not identical, but
But
it's the same properties.
But it's not the same article.
True.
That's the difference.
True.
I've been through this before with the ZBA, things like that, and it's not the same. It's not the same scope.
I think it's,
And we weren't going CDT, we were
That's-
going CN, remember? Aren't we going CN on them?
I don't
The
think it
whole
needs it,
thing?
but there's no reason not to wait.
I think that's the prudent thing to do, is
Yeah. Move on.
because we're all running off of memory right now, and I think to do this, if we're kind of inclined as a board to
All
head
is
into a
well.
positive direction, then let's do the appropriate due diligence here. at the
Okay,
moment.
make a motion to continue
Can we
to,
continue to next week?
whenever.
We can get an answer by then, right?
Yeah.
You want to do it to the 12th?
Well,
We got
yeah,
other stuff coming up on the 12th
Okay.
anyway.
Before we go
Fine.
racing off to continue,
Anybody else want to talk?
there you go. Is there anyone else in the audience that'd like to speak on this? Did we pretty much cover everything with you guys?
Cover it, yeah.
I'll make a motion to put this over to January 12th.
Second.
January 12th, Andrew?
He's got it. He's got it. Motion's made in second. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say
Aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, so the next one is a zoning bylaw amendment to Chapter 139, Section 2 of the Code of Nantucket to insert a new definition of ownership. Andrew, Leslie?
Mr. Chairman, Attorney Reed is the sponsor of this article, and I think, he can tell you about a recent case that brought this issue to light. I think, overall, I think this article has merit, and maybe you can explain that.
Sure.
As stated, I think this is a pretty simple concept. Ownership means record title. The issue that came up, the case that Andrew is referring to, was a land court case that was not appealed from and came out in a way that was surprised an awful lot of people that were involved in it, where there was a situation with a wife and a husband that had bought property in trusts at different times. Each had bought it independently, but the court determined that ownership could mean control, even though control isn't in that section of the bylaw. And it was a strange case. I say it surprised a lot of people.
How does this work with the case that we all used for decades back in the day? Yeah, DiStefano. Is this counter to DiStefano?
Well, DiStefano was a very limited case. DiStefano,
Checkerboarding, basically.
it was checkerboarding on the eve of a zoning change.
Right.
Not
For a dollar.
and it was all owned by the same guy up to the point of doing that. So I think in that situation, the common ownership would have prevented him from doing what he was trying to do. In these other cases, basically the language in that case that indicated that there was common control, the appeals court said we don't mean to imply that that because parties are married to each other that there's common control.
Right.
But rather that the circumstances in that Stefano case, where they were all spun out into separate ownership, some of the lots were put into a trust of which the husband owned the whole thing. Some of the lots were put into a trust of which he was the trustee, which is common ownership on
She's the
itself.
beneficiary.
Some were put into a corporation that he was the sole stockholder, and some were put into his wife's name. The court in that case basically said, give us a break. He still owns it all. And that was the way the decision came down. This doesn't attempt to deal with that situation, but with the circumstance in which you have different ownership throughout, ownership should mean record title.
How does that deal with a 99-year lease issue?
99-year lease doesn't have anything to do with zoning. That's, a 99-year lease is not ownership.
Well, in Hedgesbury, they went down that road, if you recall.
They did, but that's
And we had all kinds of discussions in the zone, in light of zoning, how that really worked, because you couldn't separate the ownership up there.
right.
So that got squirrely. So this is even another squirrel invading the nest?
Well, I don't know about that. Squirrels aren't supposed to be on Nantucket.
Oh,
I
they're
have one
here.
that lives on my deck.
Ed Metcalf used to shoot them on sight.
Mid-70s. They showed up.
But I think the point is that we get into too many issues of having to look behind record title to determine the ownership if we and result in some, I think, grossly unfair results, as in that case involving the Duane family, which I wasn't involved in, but we all heard about.
How do you
and-
deal with blind trusts? You don't know who owns it. It could be the same guy as the one next door in a different trust. We don't usually get into who the beneficiary is.
If you get into a situation, yeah, you don't, and you can't.
Right.
If there are different beneficiaries of trusts, again, I think you're going down a slippery slope if you try to investigate every situation like that.
We usually don't.
You don't, and what I'm saying is, you shouldn't have to.
Okay. So just simply by the fact that there's a different trust name on each
Different.
lot,
Right.
even if the same
Now, if you have
beneficiary is the same
trustee,
person?
if you
That's
have
what I'm
the same
saying.
trustee, then you've got a different issue on the thing, because you've got evidence of common ownership right there.
Even though the trusts are different.
If the trusts are genuinely different, then they shouldn't merge. But if, I wind up from time to time being asked as a lawyer to take title in a situation where people don't want their name on the thing. More often these days it's done through an LLC, but.
I see you guys on stuff. I see you on a lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
And I have to be very careful to make sure that I don't already have
Next
title
door.
to an adjacent parcel for a completely different client in my name and result in some implication of common ownership.
So you see this is just clarifying this issue?
This clarifies it. It would prevent, as I say, a grossly unfair result like the Duane case from taking place. I thought a great deal about how Andrew and I had a conversation about whether we should have an article to deal with this kind of issue, and after various ideas of trying to set up certain standards that would be applied to determine the common ownership issue, I said, wait a minute, I think a definitional change in ownership would be the simplest way to handle it.
Okay.
Did you talk to town council about this?
We just mentioned that, and I think we do want to get a final read from them on this particular article. But I think it is an issue of fairness. I mean, what this comes about is with a lot that if a family or owners have not taken affirmative actions, then the lots are merged and that's it. But in this case, and a lot of other instances, there was clear attempts to keep the lots separate, have different groups of beneficiaries, and the case sort of, the way I read it is, they came into common control for a brief moment, and that was it, they're done.
Well, the ZBA used to see a lot of those, Arthur. You represented several of those where
Sure.
there was the will devised it to somebody for 5 minutes before they got it out of that name because the will did that.
And things were
And-
set up for other generations,
Right,
and
they all of a sudden they merged. There's one glaring one out in Tom Nevers, I remember very clearly, big lots. And we had to get a variance, and it was tough going. We got a variance from the ZBA, and they've granted several of these variances where they just sort of went like this and came back out, but for a brief moment, so sorry.
So I
But
think the
that's
intent
not
is,
helping
we don't
us.
want to open up all kinds of pre-existing non-conforming lots,
Right.
but at least for those people that have taken affirmative steps, that's really the intent of the article.
So even though the will would give it to them, go back to the one in Tom Nevers, even though the will gave it to that person before it went out of that common owner control again for literally 5 minutes, this would keep that
I
from,
don't think we'd solve that situation.
all right, we'd still be back there again.
Yeah.
That's what I'd love to solve, is the
Real common
ownership issue.
ownership like that, which the will would do. I mean, the will is operative as of the time of death.
Right.
And if they come into common ownership, that's common ownership. They merge.
I'd like to solve, they both had structure, one had a structure and one did not. I'd like to solve that problem at some point.
If they've got dwellings on them, of course, they don't merge.
They don't merge, but that was a one large vacant lot for the kids, and then their parents had the other
Right.
one, and all of a
All right,
sudden, it's the
let's-
same people.
we're-
I'd like
we're-
to solve that problem in your future life.
Yeah, but I think we're getting a little off tangent here, so let's kind of focus back on where
But
we're
I have
at
no problem with
with
this
this
one.
particular. So, do you want to wait one meeting?
I think we want to get a final ruling from town
Sure.
council, but I think that,
Makes sense. We make a good input there for any, modifications.
Yep.
to this. Either as a modification of this, or if it has to go outside the scope of this, perhaps the board would want to submit something that, the
Sure.
town council would recommend.
Okay. Catherine?
I'm just wondering, after this, through the chair, are there any other towns in Massachusetts that have done this, have had this definition straightened out? Because the Attorney General, this may have already been done, the trail may have already been laid.
I don't know the answer. I haven't researched it.
Not locally, it hasn't. Not locally, it hasn't. This just came down, didn't it?
it's a recent case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which everybody expected to be appealed, and it wasn't.
Strangest things are not appealed.
Well, I think they were old and sort of wanted to get on with it.
Which judge at land court?
I don't remember.
Probably our
Anyways,
favorite.
all right, I don't want to keep philosophizing on this further. I think
I'll make a
we've-
motion to put it over to the 12th. Is that enough
Sounds-
time?
Second.
I think I have public comment in support.
Yeah, please. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I think that Arvin's article is excellent because, essentially the DiStefano case is distinguishable in the sense that that was the worst possible set of facts for someone who was checkerboarding, where you had this, an off-island type subdivision, and you come, pick your lot, but then they were checkerboarding with all these trusts and LLCs, but it was clearly a subdivision.
Right.
Whereas the case that Arthur was referring to, which came out a few months ago, is essentially what we've been doing here on Nantucket for 40 years, which is that you can try to save a lot for your kid or whatever if you take certain steps. And basically every step that everybody has taken for the past 40 years was dismissed out of hand by this court case. And there's essentially no way to overcome it. Or almost no way to overcome it. Where DiStefano said, this is a really bad case, the case that Arthur referred to says, we're going to view almost anything where people are related in almost any way as being a merger.
That's ridiculous.
It's fairly
It
excessive.
sets us back 40 years,
Right.
too.
But I also think that this issue does not create a problem with allowing people to get more subdivisions, because if you start taking lots and putting them into these 99-year leases and stuff, it would still trigger those zoning provisions that don't allow that. It wouldn't let you get around that. This is only dealing with what we have here is if you have an undersized lot next to a developed lot, you could want to preserve it to sell off as an investment or for your family, for your kids, those kind of things. You can put it in trust for people or in LLCs for people by breaking it, and then it creates a vehicle for that to happen. But what it doesn't do is if you actually have merger, it doesn't unmerge things where the same person or same entity owns.
Is there anyone else who wanted to comment on this? Thank you, Steve. All right,
I never
so
took a vote.
the motion was to continue until the 12th. Second, is there further discussion on that comment? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
You aye?
I'm sure he is. He's
Original.
also
Yeah.
getting a sip of water. All those opposed? That's a unanimous vote by the board. We'll continue it. So the next one is very similar. It's an amendment to Chapter 139, Section 2 of the Code of Nantucket to insert a definition of municipal. Gavin, please.
And Attorney Reed has also sponsored this article. It's I think it's an article, again, that has merit. It would clarify that the land bank is, in fact, a subset of our municipal uses. It's something that's not quite clear and has caused some problems with the ZBA. So, and he could enlighten us.
Very, very briefly, specifically, this came out of a situation that was involved in, it's now been resolved. The neighbors have dropped all their appeals with regard to the land bank's proposed improvement playground in Cottage Park.
Yep.
They dropped the appeals?
They just dropped the appeals. We wrote them a nice letter saying that the land bank was going to be a good citizen, and that was the end of it. I think they got sick of paying their lawyers. Anyway, the issue came up of municipal use. There is no definition of municipal in the zoning bylaw. The land bank looks at the property like a municipal entity. It is created by a state statute, but it's elected by the voters of Nantucket. The employees are treated as municipal employees. The town has given its full faith and credit for their bond issues. I mean, how municipal can you get? But the issue came up before the Board of Appeals, and even though the Board of Appeals had an opinion from George Pucci to the effect that the land bank was in fact municipal, they found that they were unable to make a determination as to whether the land bank was municipal or not.
Seriously.
And in any event, as a result of that, and again, the issue is resolved for the land bank right now on that case, but I think across the board, it's well to provide that every county or town agency or board or department, and including the Nantucket Land Bank, is municipal.
Yep. That makes good sense.
Love it.
Go ahead.
Andrew, I'm just used to it being on the HTC and Planning Commission, but you're listing things such as Town of Nantucket, County of Nantucket, agency, board, or department. Do not put comma commission in that list also, because otherwise you've copied everything but one. Just a technical. I'm just saying, should we add commission?
I think that the town, well...
We have several commissions, that's why I'm asking.
And how many of those commissions...
Water companies?
Those commissions govern departments of the town. The Water Commission is basically the governing board of the water department. The HDC doesn't go out and is commissioned as so-called, but it doesn't, it could just as easily have been called a board as a commission. It doesn't go out taking action with regard to town-owned properties. It doesn't own any properties.
Okay. The other question would be, would the Nantucket Housing Authority, because we're also elected by the populace here, would the Nantucket Housing Authority be included in this? Because every move we make, we've got to come back to the ZBA. And that was town land.
Well, your housing authority is really a state, and state is automatically, through its sovereign creation, is exempt from local zoning.
We've had to go back to the ZBA multiple times on 40Bs, right from the beginning, 1983.
Well, state agencies are not subject to local zoning,
So
just
we
like
could-
federal
we
agencies
could fall
are
under
not.
a municipal state exemption. We don't have to get a 40B.
I don't know if you've ever pushed the issue, but I would believe that housing authority exists as if it's a state entity.
Well, we just did the 40B with Satcham's Path.
Well,
Well, there was a private developer, private, non-profit
We owned it.
developer.
The Housing Authority only turned it over last month.
Mm-hmm.
We were the applicant for the Satcham's Path, because we owned the property. We had to come in with Satcham's Path and we had to sign off on it. We held title to that property until last month, until I signed the deed.
was a little longer ago than a month. But in any event, it's a question I hadn't frankly thought of.
Well, I just brought it up because we're talking about municipal exemptions of
I mean-
town-owned property, et cetera, et cetera. And that land came to us with a reverter clause back to the town if we didn't use it for housing, affordable housing purposes. So that's why I'm asking. We went through all that hoorah when we didn't have to for the last 30 years.
I don't have an answer to that. I don't know.
It's certainly worth us asking, though.
Well, I mean, I can just tell you that my experience with housing authorities in other locations, they completely did not have to follow zoning.
Should we not add Nantucket Housing Authority to this, or we just get it under the state?
I think if you add something to it, potentially getting rid of it
Outside the
going
scope.
outside the scope.
Well, we
That's-
should, is there
I
any
agree
way you
with
can
that.
ask town council about
Yep.
that for me?
If you're already automatically exempt anyway, you don't need to be defined into being municipal.
Because there's something that we had to give up in order to get that Sachem's Path,
Well,
and that was access to the basement and a window in the basement.
all right.
So that's why I'm bringing it up now, because I'm just looking at this going, oh, Nantucket Land Bank, interesting.
What about the airport, Arthur?
That's what I'm
The
saying,
airport-
commission.
I know it's like the water company, but they own a lot of land.
That's what I'm saying, airport commission. And that's what I'm saying, put the word commission in here.
Mm-hmm.
When you're listing all these other things, I would put commission in here.
Okay. Well, we'll check on it.
Just do me a favor too, just if you're gonna talk to town council, just make sure this doesn't cross a scope issue all of a sudden by putting it
Putting
on.
commission in.
Because I can
Because
see,
if it does, I think you're on the right track here. I don't think I'd want to wait another year. So I think either if we could do it as a technical amendment, or the other thing maybe to just get this thing rolling in a year's worth of time, modify it again.
This isn't home rule, is it?
No.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right, I agree. I mean, I think that, right, I mean, I'm really surprised when this issue came up.
Yeah.
I found municipal as a use as of right in the bylaw. Where's the definition of municipal?
What is municipal?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's just a word that we assume to mean something.
you
Well,
can't in the
true.
Not ever
definitions.
be assumed it's the same
I tell you,
thing.
So we've
I like
found
this
many
because
times.
Right.
this is something, this is a housekeeping issue that was never housekeeped. We haven't even swept it under the rug, so we're fixing it. Because I can tell you that airport stuff is down the road. Arthur, I hope you're still here. Stand up for town meeting, because I'll tell you, there's going to be a lot of things down the road at the airport. So
Yeah, that's
we
something
should
to
get
check.
that in there and be clear about what we're doing. This is a great thing that you're doing for us. So do we make an emotion here?
Well, we gotta wait
Before
for
you do
town
that,
council.
hold
Okay.
the vote for a minute there. Sarah, did you have
I
something
just
first?
wanted to say that scope is a question for me, and I would say that adding commission to the scope, so you don't have a problem if you want to
Okay.
add that in.
I think,
It's just a word.
I agree. I think we'll still run it by town council
Yeah,
as
run it
well.
by
too,
I mean-
so that-
council, but doesn't really matter what it says.
Such, wow.
Well, they declined to issue an opinion in the last one,
The airport
or on
commission.
this issue,
Yeah.
on whether or not there was municipal. Or
Oh, no, George Bushy issued the opinion,
not.
and the Board of Appeals was treating it as if it was my opinion. I kept having to say, no, this is what you asked town council for opinion, and this is what George gave.
And then they
you.
ignore the opinion.
Yeah.
Anyways, is there anyone else who wants to comment on this?
Frustrating.
Motion would be appropriate to
I'll
continue
make a
this.
motion to continue this to the 12th.
Second.
Second, sorry.
That's okay.
Yep.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That's unanimously.
Now, this one I have a.
I'm
Next
excited
thing is an
about this one.
amendment to Chapter
Yeah.
130, Section
This is the outdoor article.
17C of the Code of Nantucket to insert new subsection addressing the maximum height of a structure situated within certain flood areas designated by FEMA.
Mr. Chairman, this article, also sponsored by Mr. Reed, would measure height in these particular areas not to exceed 28 feet above the minimum height of the at which the first floor of the structure will conform with all of the applicable building codes. So this is to deal with the new FEMA maps, which have expanded the flood zone and caused a requirement with new costs, basically, to elevate many of these structures up. Can explain that
the
further.
first floor now has to be at a higher elevation than the 8 feet that it had been. And what I have drafted here, again, this arose from a case that I was involved in, which now has been resolved. We got a variance from the ZBA that took care of the problem. But the concept was there. Basically, in a normal situation, with a normal property that doesn't have to have a special foundation under it, your maximum height under zone is 30 feet, and you're going to have approximately 2 feet of space between grade and the first floor with a normal foundation. What we're saying here is taking from that 30 feet overall height, the 2 feet that you, in every normal case, have as foundation, and limit the height of the structure to the 28 feet above the level at which the first floor has to be in order to meet the requirements in FEMA, under FEMA in the new flood zone, particularly the velocity zones.
Yeah, go ahead.
Love it.
I got a problem with it.
What?
I mean, we've gone round and round over various height issues with the definition of height, where you measure height, mean grades and all that stuff for 20, 30 years since it was messed up the first time by Chalecki back in the 80s. I've been involved in a lot of those down on Hulbert Avenue over time. They're already at 30 feet. They're gone. They need a variance. I don't know if this is doing what you think it's going, what we think it's going to do. Since a lot of the structures that are coming up are existing structures, and their already volume is 30 feet. This 28 feet, what does that have anything to do with anything? It doesn't, because they're already over 30 feet, and you pull them up 2 to 3 feet, because the HCC is seeing a ton of these things.
Well, if they're over 30 feet now, they can go up by special permit. If they're under 30 feet and have to go over 30 feet, they're creating a new
variance.
Nonconformity, and that requires a variance.
Right. This isn't getting rid of the requirement for variance.
Well, the concept is to get rid of the requirement for variance, so long as you're limiting the height of your structure to the height above the first floor that you would be able to have under any circumstances.
That doesn't work. If you've got a house that's at 30 feet now, it's conforming at 30 feet, which is what we're seeing at the HDC. They're 28, 29, 30 feet already. And you're coming up. This doesn't do anything for you, because you're not chopping off part of the house to keep it under 28 feet. You're going to get a variance again, because your house is legal, is conforming at 28, 29, 30 feet. And because you have to bring it up because you're doing so much to it, you got to come up. There's one down on Easton Street across from the White Elephant right now. And you have to come up 2 or 3 feet, if not 4, in some of these that we're seeing. You're going to get a variance. This doesn't help you still. You're conforming, and now you're... What is 28 feet? I don't get the 28 feet.
But it's from the new first floor.
Can I
No,
add something?
you're missing the point.
Maybe I could,
Hold on.
You're missing the point. You're conforming.
Sometimes, this would apply to new construction and old construction.
Right. It's not going to help your old construction if you're already at 30 feet. And you're coming up to 34 feet, you still got to get a variance.
No.
This says 28 feet above the first floor. You're not chopping off the house.
We're not saying we are.
Well, then what is 28 feet? What's the
28
relevance?
feet is the distance between the first floor and the peak of the roof.
This is only going to be new construction. 28 feet is going to have any relevance at all.
No, it would apply in existing construction as well.
How?
That where you would normally be able to do a structure, as far as zoning is concerned,
Right, forget HDC.
HDC gets a bite at the high apple under any circumstances. But in a situation where the house, if you're not dealing with a FEMA flood zone, your overall height of the building
Right,
above
forget
grade
that.
can be 30 feet.
We're talking about
We're saying-
things that are coming up.
And so we're talking about things that are coming up, coming down, and new construction, anything. The concept is that you can have it, effectively, you're limited to 28 feet above the first floor right now by the 30-foot height limitation. What we're saying is that 28-foot height that exists above the first floor in a normal situation also applies in a FEMA flood zone. You can do the 28 feet above the level of the first floor.
You're missing my point. Sometimes you're,
Potentially maximum 30.
It could potentially put you at a maximum close to that, yeah.
of what?
38 feet.
Yeah.
Without any permits.
Without zone, HDC,
Forget the HCC part of it. I don't agree that it can go to 38 feet at any time for any reason. Because the way they have expanded this zone, it's affecting stuff up Coffin Street, across from all that stuff down there on Washington Street, all clearly everything down on Brant Point. It's affecting areas that before weren't really as impacted by the extra height because of the zone change. And going to 38 feet is alien to anything that we've seen unless it's already on Hulbert Avenue and it was constructed at 34, 36 feet to begin with. So you're taking these humongous things I can't do it. I understand why we're trying to do this because people are getting into trouble because they're having to raise them up.
They're losing
But the
space.
28 feet, I think, is
And
doesn't
you're
have any
winding up-
relevance.
You're winding up also, if you have to have that high a foundation and you're limited to 30 feet, you're winding up with a very squat house.
Well, no, I think you have to get a variance, which is what they've all gotten in the past. I think what should be done
Well, nobody
is
should be
special
putting-
permit.
Nobody
I don't agree with this.
Nobody should be put in the position of having to get a variance because the standards for variance are so limited.
It's crazy.
Special permit, perhaps an approach to this would be to be able to go above, in a FEMA flood zone, to go above the 30-foot height limitation by special permit.
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
Because new construction obviously has a little bit more flexibility. You're dealing with a 30-foot, 30-foot, let's say 30-foot high house, where its first floor level is not the 2 feet. So you're going over the 28 feet. And I've seen it, where they're embedded in the ground. And if you're going up 3 or 4 feet, you are way past the 28 foot.
The very tall houses you're talking about
Yeah.
are all over 30 feet now, and therefore, to go up more, they can go up more by special permit rather
Right.
than by variance.
But I'd like to see anybody dealing with this issue by special permit. So this isn't carte blanche, you can go to 38 feet, because that's not something I'm ever going to be comfortable with, under zoning, under anything else. So I think it should go to special permit and see how it goes.
To you, Mr. Chairman, ask Madam Moderator how she would feel about
I love those. Tuning
the
up.
scope of
There
an
she
Spring
is.
training is in February.
that would modify this by inserting language to provide for a special permit. To do the same thing.
I think it's probably fine because it's not giving away more,
It's taking away.
Okay.
It's more restrictive. I'd be comfortable with that and see how that works
Okay.
to begin with.
Yeah.
Because it may be sometimes it's not appropriate 38 feet, and maybe 34 feet with some massaging, it's possible. You don't
Okay.
get the exemption under flood for residences, you do for commercial buildings, which is another concern of mine. Commercial buildings can be tight-wrapped. There's no reason why a commercial building should all of a sudden be allowed carte blanche to go to 38 feet when they don't legally have to do that. They can choose to, but they don't have to.
I think what I'd like to do at this
Smart
point is,
to do that.
this is getting a little back and forth. I mean, you've made your point, I think. There are other board members who'd like to contribute as well, too, who may have some varying viewpoints, and we still have yet to hear from the public. Mr. Borchert.
Question for Mr. Reed, through you, Mr. Chairman. I think this question was lost about 15 minutes ago, but if you had a 30-foot structure, an existing structure, and you wanted to raise the first floor 2 feet, then you're at 28 feet for a total height, correct? Is that one of the reasons why you're doing this? So you give yourself 2 feet to raise the first floor to conform to the FEMA map zone. Does that make sense?
No.
No.
The
The volume's
I'm not saying
sorry.
it may miss the point slightly. Basically, the concept here is to be able to have, in all cases, a 28-foot high building above the first floor, where that is affected by the FEMA regulations. If you have a house that's already at 30 feet, but not over 30 feet, in order to go up, you need a variance. If you're taking the existing house and going up with it, a variance is a high standard, but you do at least have the conditions of, quote, soil conditions and bondages, which are in the state act of the local bylaw, as justification for a variance, which is supposed to be sparingly granted, but again, the justification is there. If you have a house, a peculiarity of the Massachusetts zoning act, if you have a single or two-family dwelling that is already at 31 feet, let's say, you can go up without limitation by special permit. The height would obviously be determined, and certainly the special permit granting authority is going to limit that, but there's no limit on the amount technically that can be granted by special permit. Commercial structures do not have the benefit of that special permit situation. They would require variances in any circumstance in order to go over. The article that I'm proposing would allow that to be done. And if we put special permit language in there, which is probably a pretty good idea, would be able to be done in that situation, so then by special permit as well, rather than by variance. Variances are not something that you really want to make people have to get.
Hold on.
Thank you.
I just have a simple question. I'm not going to get this complicated because I am not I don't understand it enough, but I do understand what you're trying to do, I think. Let me ask you this. If somebody builds a new house in the FEMA under the old way, meaning the height part, not the height, just the foundation, where you get the first floor measurement, you have trouble making a full 2-story house, don't you?
So,
I mean, now it's kind of like second floor is kind of story and a half, just because of this extra height where you get your measurement from to get to 28.
Yeah, we went through this on a case recently, the case that caused me to be thinking about this for the ZBA. We got a variance, and we got, I think, to 34.4 feet ultimately through a variance issued by the ZBA, so it's no longer in play.
What I meant was, just to make it simple, because I'm thinking about this at town meeting.
Yeah.
See, I get right out of this room, I'm already at the high school, and how people think. So you got to get this down, simplified. You're getting, Linda's wicked complicated because she already knows all this stuff in her head, but there's not that many people that understand it. I'm in favor of what you're trying to do, because I'll call this the Al Gore article. I mean, you've got to get this fixed now, because the longer this goes out and more building that happens, the more problems there are going to be for each person doing it. So you have to find a way to be able to build a regular 2-story house, the right height floors on the second floor, where all the homes downtown are all full 2-story, and some are 3. You know what I'm saying, Arthur? I'm just making a point that you ended up reducing the size of the house height-wise, even because of this first floor measurement.
And in the case that I'm speaking of, the ZBA was basically suggesting flattening the roof pitch in order to solve that.
That's going to make a problem for her.
We have an HDC over here.
That's crazy.
Problem with that.
No. So we got to clean this up, and get this ready for town meeting, because we don't want to have this go another year, because there's going to be that many more people doing this.
I'm getting one every week.
Yeah.
Question about technical.
Okay.
Hold on. Is there anyone else in the audience who wants to comment on this?
Arthur, we've got, I don't have a map with it, so people, you got to have a map showing people exactly
Oh, I know.
which zones, where we're talking about.
Right.
And I'm questioning, we've got, what, 3 zones? We've got the critical zone, then the next one, and then the next one?
What, you mean the flood zone?
Yeah,
So, yeah, you've got your velocity zone.
right.
Your 100-year flood, and then, as it gets further away from, obviously, the
It
water.
gets less and
further
less.
away.
Now,
a
in
good
this
song.
article... These new phones, jeez.
I can't turn it off.
I thought you were playing the
I'm embarrassed, and I will be back.
That's okay.
The biggest area that's affected, obviously, is Grant.
That's what I was going to say, the news, the different zones.
Along Washington Street.
But it is affected a lot, yeah.
Well, all the way up to Union
correct?
Street, even our house on Union Street is
Coffin,
included.
Union,
Yeah, Coffin in particular is
What's the
changing.
average?
But the question I'm asking you is areas of 100-year flood. Does that include all 3 zones, the ones that are closest to the water, or is that just the velocity and the 100-year? Are we talking about 38 feet for the whole shebang, going back several hundred feet? Are we talking about the area of critical concern, the velocity area right on the water?
Well, I think you'd be including, no, you include the velocity zone and the 100-year flood. The flood hazard zone is what you're talking about.
Right.
Will be anything within the flood
So
hazard.
nothing beyond the velocity in the 100 years?
Yeah, no, then you're outside of it.
Because that's up to you, that's the bottom of Union Street. So I just want to make sure that there's a map coming so people can see exactly what we're talking about. Because it's not just there, it's around the harbor, it continues on. And I don't think anybody, and if you look at the Surfside Area Plan and you look at the Brant Point Area Plan, both of which I was an architect of, they don't want a lot more high structures. The 100-year zone is where we've asked on Brant Point to keep the structures lower, because we don't want to mess up the little cottage hierarchy that still exists in there from, 120 years ago. The taller ones we've acknowledged are along the waters and on, that's,
Yeah, I mean,
so there's a little bit of a conflict here with what the plans have said that they want in those zones versus the flood zone versus where we could potentially end up here, which is why I'm concerned about, have carte blanche, which is why I'm after the special permit. So somebody's watching, paying
This is
attention.
inside the zoning district, correct, Arthur? This is.
It's
Well,
not tied to a zoning district.
Right.
No, it's tied.
just FEMA.
Yeah.
Well, it's the flood, it's the overlay district.
So just
Right.
keep in mind that there's tenants in both of those plans that go against being able to go up that high. So especially on new construction, let's face it. Or adding second floors. Adding second floors to those small cottages, that's where it's really come up. Because they've had to bring the whole thing up, and then they're adding a second floor on top of what was a 22-foot high structure. They're becoming 30 feet high or over. So I'd just rather have somebody have some control over what's happening, and the public has a chance to comment on it, so.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I support the article, but do you need to tweak it to deal with the 25-foot height in Nantucket? I don't know, is there a flood?
That's an overlay zone, right?
Well, yeah, anything in the village residential's got the 25-foot height.
So, you might need,
But they're not in FEMA in Mattocket, are they? Oh, Tennessee Ave and stuff?
Well, they're in the 100
Oh, my
foot,
God.
right? They're not in velocity.
Mr. Chairman,
All right,
can,
yeah, I know, it's kind of going all over the place. Please, yeah, hold on.
I just want to make it clear, and Linda, you've stated a couple times, carte blanche, and it's so open. Zoning is completely separate from HDC regulations. Zoning could say 30 feet, and you can require much lower. So I'm concerned that there's too much of this mixing and matching.
I just want somebody to have control by special permit, and I think that's where that comes.
I understand, but I am concerned that, HDC concerns and the height is something that I've been wanting to talk to on the planning board for a long time, and this sort of shutting everything down based on HDC concerns makes me nervous.
It's not, and I'm also talking
Well-
about the plans, the area plans, and all the other things that go into 38 feet, which is something we don't normally see here, is 38 feet. And when he said 38 feet, that sort of,
But 38 feet, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
is a zoning allowance that doesn't have to be followed by the HDC.
no, of course not.
And for whatever valid reasons the HDC applies, they will control. 38 feet is an upward standard that, again, keeps them out of the zoning board to hear, where in most cases, they grant variances now that are suspect. Now they have to go through the expense and the time to get a special permit. It just seems that, this is a fairly limited area. Yes, we could move it to special permit, and if that's what the board wishes to do, that's fine. But ultimately, whether the zoning says it could be 50 feet, the HDC still controls the structure. So I just, it's not carte blanche. There's plenty of regulations that are still in place. It's not, we decide what the height is, and then that's what it is. It's not true.
Essentially what Mr. Reed is trying to do, in my opinion, is not let people's houses be smaller. In other words, usefulness. The house is the same size, but it's smaller. And guess what? Valuable. The houses are valuable. Dirt is not free. I mean, we don't want the downtown becoming a place that it's harder to build something that people want to build because of this building it a mile off the ground thing. You know what I mean? I think that what Arthur's doing is right. The technicalities of it and all the special permit stuff and what HCC can do, I agree with Andrew. I agree with both of you that it's confusing, but the simplicity of what you're trying to do makes a lot of sense to catch it now. We're only 1 year into this. I mean, there's going to be a lot of building and all the lift ups. It affects everything, essentially. It doesn't have to be just new construction, right?
No. It's a 50% rule on renovation, so.
I mean, what about these little cottages, Andrew? Like, I mean, are we going to have? I mean, we don't have any case law for this yet. This is too new, but like the little NISDA cottages and the little stuff that Linda's talking about downtown. One little touch, these things have to be poof off the ground.
No, the 50% rule, which is it's tied to the value of the
Okay.
of the property. If the improvements are more than 50%, the requirements are you have to bring it in full compliance with the regulations.
I think there's going to be a lot of variance, a lot of waiver things and stuff for
You
this.
can't get a waiver on a residence. Those little four cottages behind it, all coming up, are coming out and going back and being reconstructed. One-story cottages, 4 feet in the air.
Ken,
Wow.
Yeah.
is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to comment on this?
Stilts.
I think
Here's
that, I don't know, what do you think about continuing this?
I
just
think
to kind of
staff
get
and I think
some
staff and
fun?
Arthur have to get together on this one, talk
Yeah.
about it.
But-
I don't think we should make a special permit burden the applicant, Andrew. I agree with you there.
Yep.
If we can get something down where this is not another board to go to for more, I hate to say it, attorneys to work
You're
more.
doing it now, man.
I mean, another permit process.
They're
Yeah,
You know what I'm
doing it.
saying?
They're all going to the ZBA.
No, I agree with you.
Well-
I think that really is the case to steer away from having to go through multiple boards to deal with this. And when I hear the word control, I'm curious as to who's exerting which control where. All right? As Andrew has identified, one board has certain purview over certain things. That's fine. But this ambiguous control of who's controlling what, I mean, you're stuck with what the federal government has done with FEMA standards. And you're not going to change that. You're short of hell or high water patch. You're not going. Bad choice. I'm sorry. That really
That was
wasn't
good,
intentional.
Barry.
Yeah, that was good. But anyways, you're not really going to change that. And it's really not just tied to building heights and stuff as well too. It's tied to insurance issues with things. There comes a point where you've got to make it easier for people to try to get some things done in a common sense mode. I think that's what we tried to accomplish here. But respectfully, I'd like to say, there's been a few issues that have been brought up that I think need to be kind of worked out a little bit. And I think, especially Nat was right, something that desperately will need to be considered between the time of now and town meeting is either to insert, like we have in the past, an explanation of or something which really endeavors to simplify the concept. Because I think you've had a taste of where it could go tonight. And I would dread at town meeting watching it go within those multiple directions. Briefly, so.
Through you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Reed, did you look at the Cape and Islands, other towns, how they were handling this? Thanks.
Nobody has zoning like we
Do you want a little more time with Bob to work on this one?
Yes.
Put it into the 9th and see where we're at. Would that be acceptable? Sure.
February 9th?
February
Okay.
9th. I think staff.
I didn't know we had a date yet. Cool.
That's
Yeah.
a regular meeting.
Oh, okay.
But that's okay. We can alter that if we need to.
I'll make a motion to put it to February 9th.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it
Where's that
unanimously.
next one?
I'm looking for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. Next one before us at this point, which is the last one of the citizen articles. This is an amendment to Chapter 139, Sections 2, 7A, 7B, and 18B of the Code of the Town of Nantucket to insert a new use tiny house. The proposal includes a definition, an amendment to the use chart, an amendment to prohibited uses, and the addition
Got it.
of a parking requirement. Mr.
That's all
Morse.
your stuff.
Mr. Chairman, the sponsor, Isaiah Stover, is here tonight, and this is an article that we had talked about on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at some time, too, and these are these micro houses, small
Yeah.
houses. There's kind of a movement across the country where people are looking at them. Some are on wheels, right? And that's, are you considering that?
Yes.
Okay. Leslie and I, before this article came up, we have been talking about how we might expand the density and allow more than, currently there's a 2-unit per lot
Right.
limitation. What this would do would be to add an exception to allow these kind of houses
Certain zones.
in certain zones by special permit. We also, like I said, we haven't finalized our article, which we could certainly fold the intent into that article. But, so I think, we're thinking about this in the same basic way to expand the allowance. So with that, we'll look at our article on your meeting on the 9th. But in the meantime, we could certainly talk about this.
Yep.
Well, this is actually the first article I've ever presented, and the first meeting I've been to, to preface, I'm going to limp along here. But my idea with this article is to present an opportunity for people who are kind of in between renting and home ownership, having an opportunity to get that stepping stone housing situation resolved, as well as address the housing that we have, especially in the summertime, we get this influx of people, and people are scrambling, trying to find someplace to live, above and beyond trying to find an affordable place to live. So I see this type of structure as a method to that. So essentially, in a nutshell, at this point, I'm kind of in information gathering stage, and so be able to talk a little more about it later on, but that's essentially it.
I like it.
Did you have anything else, or are you all set there, Matt?
No, no.
I think what may help you between now and town meeting, if we go forward with this, either you or us, all the information that's online about tiny houses, because it's actually a name. It's not just, we didn't just dream up tiny house, it's actually tiny house. Has a whole website. I'm just questioning some of the language in here, probably can be worked out. Constructed on a movable trailer, probably never fly here. Or because of the wind, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to want whatever this dwelling unit is tied to something. What we're seeing a lot of now is people coming in on piers.
Piers, and also just like to add with the wheels, there are tie downs, and they use helixes to secure them, so you address the
I don't think that's going to work here, because they're making sheds stuck to something because of the wind loads here. But what you're missing here is piers. You've got trailer or slab foundation, you don't have piers here. So I think the word piers has to be added here, because otherwise you've limited your foundation. Because either it could be a block foundation, or it could be a slab foundation, or it could be on piers, depending on where it's located. So what you're missing is block, poured, slab, and trailer. You have to put all the kinds of foundations that are legal here.
I agree with you.
So that's missing.
You can skirt something on wheels, but you never use it.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't know if that would meet the code requirements
Oh, yeah.
because the insurance, tie downs, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera. Tying it with a bungee cord into the ground is never gonna fly with Steve. It has to be anchored. So that's why I'm saying you gotta add the block, the port, and the piers to your definition. Multiple tiny house dwellings. 500 or less. I don't know, Andrew may have some, as we move through this, Andrew
Yeah.
may have some comments on density and whatnot. But it's an interesting idea. I thought it was interesting when you told me before. And the planning board would be the special permit granting authority, which is good.
And, Barry, can I ask you a
Yeah, go ahead.
question? Isaiah, can I ask you something? Have you met with Andrew at all, staff, about any of this, like, I call it the third kitchen, okay? Because that's what we're talking about, the third kitchen. We're not talking about a tiny house, we're talking about another place to live other than the secondary dwelling
Human habitation.
on a lot. I mean, that's what we're talking about, so let's just get that out on the table. Because we've been talking about this for a couple of years, how to get the third kitchen on a lot, what lots, how big, does it have to have municipal sewer or not? I don't think it needs to. It depends. There's a lot of different pieces to this. This is something brand new that should have happened 10 years ago, but it never would have flew at town meeting then. We're all done with the saying no to houses a little bit now. We used to say no to everything. No, we're not saying no to everything now. I have a lot of thought with this third. This is a Nantucket way to provide housing, not just a big dense development. This is a way to do it incrementally for people that already own land. And I think staff could help you with this, and we might be able to make this article more palatable for some of the stuff that Linda's talking about. She's right about this. I mean, you're not going to have a trailer here, something like that's just not going to happen on Nantucket. But there may be a way to do a lot of what you want other than just the tiny house. We talk about outbuildings all the time. There's so many houses in Nantucket that don't have a kitchen that people live in. Okay? Finished basements. There isn't a house on Nantucket that doesn't get a finished basement now. I mean, that's true. Everybody's basement is finished in houses today, new houses. What are you looking at me like that for?
Mine could be in my basement.
We don't go up. Well, Arthur wants to go up, but we go down. But, you know what I mean? Down is up now, okay? Because of in-floor heating, movie
Cheapest
theaters.
space in the house is going down.
It's just the way. There's no drafty windows in a basement. So, so there's already 3 kitchens illegally in a lot of places. I mean, everybody knows that. But to have a legal third kitchen somehow that's acceptable is really what you're looking to do. And that's what we're looking to do. We just have to find the right formula for it. So I think that this is really good, and it's time for this to happen.
Mr. Chairman, I met with Isaiah several times to talk about his idea. And as Andrew mentioned, we're bringing forward an article for you all to consider that is very similar and also deals with the accessory apartment that we currently have.
Yeah.
And we just weren't completely sure that we were on totally the same page, so we had encouraged him to submit a citizen petition to at least get something started, get the conversation started. And if we can fold it into a planning board article, that would be great. But at least we're talking about it.
Good.
And I would probably want to throw over to you that there's probably some prudency there, because you've got issues. We may not like a trailer, but the first question is, how's this settle with the building department? Okay? Just because 3 members of this board sit here or 2 members say, I don't like trailers.
I didn't say I didn't like them.
No, just you let me
So it's not
finish.
going to happen.
Well,
It's a difference.
Not going to happen.
There are certain things that are not going to happen.
It's
on the
like dead
Nantucket
meat and the vultures just flock in if you don't say the right words, okay? But no, what I'm saying to you is that I think you need to work with the building department to find out what's permissible in terms of doing this, because you heard Mr. Santos say, yeah, that it may actually work with using tie downs and stuff. So that whole series of issues, before we start getting into piers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I think needs to be explored with the building department, just so we kind of understand how that takes place. Second thing, which I think there's prudency with staff again, is to look at this from a zoning perspective as well too. When you generalize and say, okay, 1 per 2,500 square feet, that's great on a 5,000, maybe even a 10,000 square foot lot. When we start getting into, let's say, an acre, 40,000 square feet, you're up to 16 of these. So as a special permit granting authority, all of a sudden what happens is when you've got something that broad, you start re-examining the scope of where does it max out at and how does it work for certain districts. Okay? Some districts, this, like in the town versus the country district, in the country district, this may prove to be very cumbersome. Whereas in the town district, it might work a heck of a lot better. Just given a whole bunch of different factors. So I think the concept is initially really good. I like it, but I think working with staff tied into something that we're going to be looking at may make more sense, because those are some of the other filters that we need to look at for it as well too. And I think you can see all of a sudden where that makes sense, because on an acre lot, if you're dealing with 16 of these, there's roadway, there's infrastructure you have to deal with. How does that all tie together? What does it begin to look like? Do you even think 16 is a good number? Okay, I'm just throwing out some very random ideas. That's where I think both Andrew and Leslie is that bring that perspective in. Because when we talk zoning, they can see this in multiple zones, right in their mind's eye, which is a great thing, and begin to understand, gee, that'll work here, or this is maybe where we need to limit it if we get into this zoning district. So I am feeling like you're on the right track. It needs more work, though, before we get there. Carl?
I support this concept a lot. I think more housing is a good idea, and I think it will be vetted out through staff and through the process, possibly combining it with a planning board article. But I think it's a good idea, and it's a good start. What the final verdict is, we will see, but we definitely have a really serious housing crisis right now, and I think this is an interesting effort to address that.
I got to bootstrap of what Barry said, what I was getting at earlier, by making sure that the definition is correct and you don't eliminate the 3 main ways that it's going to be anchored. But there are parking considerations, ground cover considerations, setbacks, the 20% rule, all the other stuff doesn't apply to the accessory apartments, but that bylaw hasn't worked very well. Right. What zones it's allowed in, the larger one should only have 1. If you were to get 2 dwellings on the property, there's all kinds of things that have to go into this. But I think the concept works. But there's a lot of stuff from a planning and a zoning perspective that have to go into this definition, and then it has to be inserted in 16 and in 7 and in other sections of the bylaw, which may take a year to get it together. It's complicated because it can't just roll into a definition if you don't then carry over the tiny house language to the other sections that deal with the ground cover, the differentiation, the setbacks, and all the other stuff that go with it. So maybe 1 per 2,500 square feet isn't the way we go. Maybe 1 per lot, depending on what zones they're allowed in, things like that. Right. So you don't want to get into a 40B situation when you go above a certain threshold. So I think it's a good concept, but I think there's a lot of parts of it that have to be plugged back into the bylaw, and it may not work for this year, depending on what you come up with, or it may have to wait a year.
Well, I think certain parts of it at least would be compatible with what we've been working on, which is a tertiary, for lack of a better word, dwelling unit. But I think that, I think if we can, I think Barry is correct in that we need to at least review with the building inspector about the trailer issue. I mean, it's prohibited now through zoning. This article would lift that prohibition, and I think that might be a good way of dealing with it. So again, we have to do a little work on that, I think, with the building inspector to find out what the restrictions on that might be. And again, our overall article would allow this in addition to the other third kitchen ideas, so the accessory apartment, this use. And I think we want to stay away from special permits per se and move into more uses allowed by right. So.
And we have to be very tight where it's allowed.
Catherine?
I'd just like to say that I think your biggest problem is going to be overcoming people's idea of what a trailer is. And when we say trailer, we're thinking something that looks really...
Katrina.
Yeah, it's just...
Or
No,
Maine.
they're not, trailers aren't allowed for human
They're on a
habitation,
trailer,
period.
but you can't tell they're on a trailer. They look like a house.
Yeah.
There's little wheels underneath that are big wheels underneath it, but you can't see them. But they look like a house.
Well, it's a wind issue, Catherine, it's a code issue, it's an insurance issue. There's a lot of issues with, you cannot, right now, human habitation in a trailer is not allowed. And being that Nantucket is in the heavy wind load, let alone the flood loads and everything else that's going on out here, you may not be able to live in a structure that is not permanently anchored to the ground. And tie downs are not anchored.
All right, but
No,
I-
it's code, and that's what something that Steve's gonna have to tell you.
Thank
But I've
you.
been through it before with another structure, not happening. It needed to be anchored to something permanent in the ground.
And that's where I don't want to conjecture any further
Right.
on this board. I think that you've got this person who has to certify that, which is your building inspector. And I think that's where it's just prudent for us right now to begin to gather some more information with him. Because right now, that's what I hear us doing up here, is speculating on certain points. He's the one who'd ultimately make certain determinations, so let's get it straight from the onset. Your point is well taken. Steve?
I was just going to say, there's a bunch of things in the zoning bylaw that allow things like this, just not freestanding. You can have apartments, you can have apartment buildings, you can have multifamily overlay. This is consistent. It's just another card we should play.
Well,
Why
that's,
do we have the right rules?
that's,
Just asking,
Yeah.
moving forward and working with staff in developing the language and what the parameters are, how do I go about doing that? Is it something we?
come.
Leslie, Andrew, go ahead. You just.
You know, we've just talked casually about it, so, you know, just come in, set up an appointment, and we'll talk about how to move forward. Yep.
The intent here is that you can have a primary, secondary, and a tiny house.
Yeah,
Essentially, we take a lot of these studios that are out there.
Well,
Utilize them.
that or a garage apartment that has an apartment,
Right.
and
Tiny
as a
house.
third, you have,
Many of them are under 400
it's
square
all
feet.
about ground cover, Paul.
Yeah.
And that's what it was really talking about. You got the ground cover, but you can't have a third kitchen.
Well, that's just the third kitchen, is really what you're.
Yeah.
You're going to take these studios,
Yeah.
they're going to become.
And it doesn't look any different. This is the thing, and again, Isaiah, I've met you, but I've never met you, so how are you? How's it going? Glad you're here. Thank you for all your effort. This is huge. When somebody comes forward with something like this, this is huge, because it's just something that we should already have done, okay? But we're slow here to get things done that we already know we need, okay? And that's fine. But a lot of times, you know, the biggest thing is perception. If you have a garage apartment and 2 houses on a lot, so 3 buildings, and you're not even quite at the full ground cover, okay? What is the difference if there's an apartment above that garage? It doesn't look different. In other words, you're not changing what can go on the ground. You're changing what's inside the building. That's what our thinking is on this more living area. The area is already allowed to be covered. It's just not allowed to be lived in. So that's what Paul is talking about. You know, we're trying to get this ground cover thing attached into this, because we're not adding more ground cover to zoning districts. Because that's a different discussion, okay? So we appreciate this, and this is good to get this thing going. Especially with all the housing issues on the table. Everybody's going to see Satcham's, what about my lot? You see, that's what people are going to start to say, and this is good. So,
it's a 40B.
whatever, it doesn't matter. It's housing.
It is. You're right. Is there anyone else who wants to comment on this? I'd probably say with staff, developing something right now, and I think there's a few more conversations to be had. It may be prudent for us to continue to.
I think that this would be a February one.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Motion to continue to February 9th.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. Thanks. Perfect. And that concludes the warrant articles. So thank you, everyone. All right, moving along at this point. Next thing before us.
Oh, we have a regular agenda.
Yes, we do.
Where am I going?
Yep, clear out some business before our next meeting of next week. So next thing before us is an A&R 7784, Town of Nantucket, Massachusetts Ave, and Nantucket Ave.
Massacre.
Mr. Chairman, this is a paper street article, standard,
Okay.
creating no new buildable parcels, just conveyance parcels.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. You have 4 second dwelling units before you at this point. Is there anything you want to isolate out from the 4 second dwellings?
Well, I'd just like to talk about the first one.
All right, so let's get to all right, so how about if we deal with 48 Vesper, 22 Eel Point, and 3 Wing Spread?
Well,
You all go with those?
not necessarily, because,
So do you want to talk about each one of these individually?
no, because it's confusing here. I
All
have
right,
stuff
so
that
are
doesn't
you-
belong to other
Thank you.
stuff.
Are you confused on all 4? Thank you. Are you confused on all 4?
No, I just don't have, I've got so much crap on this one. There was a
What would you,
condition that I did.
all right,
that
so
I-
we're just
that
going to
bugged
take
me.
these individually. That's
It's
really
all
simple.
here,
We're just going to
Linda.
take them individually.
It's all here, right here. I'll get it for you.
I got
I
it.
found it.
There's like 50 pages.
All right,
And there is something
I'm-
on the first one.
fine. So we're just going to deal with these individually, okay? First thing before us is 12 Skyline Drive on Edward Glenberg. What, is there anything the board needs
It's
to
what's
discuss?
highlighted. I don't get it. This is a convoluted situation here anyway. There is a house moving to 12 Skyline. I know very well. The site will contain a total of 4 parking spaces, 2 interior parking spaces, and 2 exterior parking spaces. What the hell is that?
I believe that was intended to be corrected. Maybe the wrong version of the report was put in your packet, but it meets the requirements of the bylaws, 4 parking spaces with adequate
Period.
room to turn around.
2 in the garage is what it means.
I don't see a garage.
Yeah,
So there's
that's how
4
I
I don't
understand.
care where the 4 spaces are, so long as they're all on the lot.
The 2 are in the garage. Those are the interior, and the 2,
To
No, what had happened was he had originally submitted a site plan without showing the parking spaces, and it needs to show the dimensions and where it was located. The first site plan he had submitted to us was not in compliance.
Well, the one I'm looking at right now is still not in compliance. It doesn't list the sizes of the spaces on that one either,
Condition number 1,
but the site plan doesn't have it.
it does say that they should submit,
Revised site plan.
Well, the site plan I've got in front of me doesn't, it shows where they are finally, but it doesn't give the dimensions at all.
right.
Mr. Chairman, I think
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
And I couldn't find one that did it.
the point is that they will have to submit the site plan. There's clearly enough room for 4 parking spaces.
Clearly.
So the final version, if you approve this, will have a new site plan clearly showing the spaces. So that's covered. That's what Catherine
I've
covered
already
in.
discussed this with Ed Lumber.
Yep.
Well, it doesn't really say that. Applicant shall submit a site plan which clearly, oh, forget that mess on the first page. Applicant shall submit a site plan which clearly indicates the dimensions and construction materials of the proposed driveway. The required number should be FOUR, and parentheses 4. The required number of 4, and the dimensions of the proposed parking spaces. Now, that doesn't require that the parking spaces meet dimensional requirements. So somewhere when you're talking about dimensions, it has to say the required dimensions under the bylaw. Otherwise, he can just tell you it's 2 by 3, and there's my dimension.
Mr. Chairman, we confirm the dimensions. I really think
you
we're
do.
getting off
But I think if we're
topic
going to
here.
state this in the number 1, it should be stated correctly.
We know how to review a site plan, and since there's a requirement that states the dimensions, they'll be reviewed.
Right, I
If
know
the
they're
dimensions
gonna do
aren't
that.
correct, we would return the site plan. I don't need that spelled out by the board.
Okay, well then correct it, the clerical errors.
Oh, boy.
I guess a little bit more
wanna
anal
go back to
retentive
my
about
tiny
making it
house.
clear that they have to meet the dimensional requirements
And I think you'll
in
see
the
that
decision.
we're on
Necessary.
any,
So that front thing will be corrected then, or spelled out anyway.
the site plan will be corrected to reflect what's supposed to happen.
No, on the front page, it was supposed to be corrected. So just correct the report. It's yellow highlighted for a reason. At least on my copy. So I'll make a motion to approve 12 Skyline with the corrections made to the report.
Second?
Am I clear on that?
Yes.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have unanimously. 48 Vesper Lane, David R. Cox. Was there an issue with that?
No,
No?
this is done in the CAD system, except that it is showing existing paved sidewalk and asphalt apron.
That's on the left side where the sidewalk is on
Okay.
the even numbers.
I couldn't remember where that was.
Yeah,
Okay.
right
Motion to
after Hugh
approve
McVicker's.
Vesper Lane.
Motion's made.
Second?
Seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it unanimously. 222 Eel Point Road, William Kathy Island.
That's Brookside.
Is there anything about this that needs to be addressed?
No, I know this property well.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve 222 Eel Point Road.
For
Second?
staff recommendations.
For staff
Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. 3 Wing Spread Lane, Nantucket LLC.
This particular site plan, did you do this one? I hate to have them ping-ponging back and forth between the two. The HDC is all over this one. We haven't approved any of these structures yet, including the secondary dwelling. And we were having issues with the driveway in particular. And they were going to leave the driveway back over here on the right where it was, so it wasn't dead in front of the house with a huge parking platform and this round thing on the left. They were going to leave it coming up the right-hand side and going left to the garage. So this isn't the correct site plan, so I didn't know it'd be better off to hang on to this until they give you the corrected site plan, because I believe this came in before we had said what we were saying to it, and we're seeing it again tomorrow, some of it tomorrow night again.
You continue this to the 12th?
Okay.
Monday, next Monday.
Yep.
Yep.
I'll make that motion to continue it to the 12th.
Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Previous plans, 10-14, Nantucket Theater Institute, 5 North Water Street. This is a motion to endorse plans.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
We've reviewed the plans, we recommend endorsement.
Board members,
Where are we? The theater?
Nantucket Theater Institute, 5 North
I'll
Water
make
Street.
that motion to endorse the plan.
And do I
Second.
hear a second? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Yes, we did. It's
That
continued
was
to
continued to
112.
12th,
Thank you, I'm sorry, Sarah.
because that's not the site plan where they're ending up.
I think I have drifted off.
Can't imagine that.
Okay.
Can I ask a technical question? Oh, never
On-
mind, I see it. I keep forgetting it's called South Valley Industrial Park.
Yes, South Valley Industrial Park and Fort Worthing. This is about potential office use and site plan review, so Andrew or Leslie.
Mr. Chairman, this is in the South Valley Industrial MCD. All the property was in the RC2 district. It's been rezoned to commercial neighborhood. The original decision, I think from 1994, allowed mostly industrial-type usage, like carpentry shops, storage and warehousing, that kind of thing. And the decision said that the planning board, without holding a public hearing, can review uses that are allowed by right.
Right.
This particular property has been rezoned to the CN district, and the uses that were allowed in the MCD aren't allowed in the CN district. And they want to use the site for office. So I recommend that the board approve that use and find that a public hearing is not necessary.
Yep. Board members?
For the record, this is my family's house, was my family's house. It's a residence, but we have no financial involvement with it any longer.
Okay. Thank you, duly noted.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
For staff recommendation. of
For
what we
staff
just reviewed.
recommendation.
Thank you. Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it unanimously. Next thing is 36-13, Farrows, 17 Broad Street. This is a discussion for the special permit decision.
Mr. Chairman, there's two issues. One, endorsement of the plans, which we recommend. And then two, one of the conditions in the decision specified a 2-bedroom master suite.
Yeah.
And the applicant now wants to construct a 1-bedroom suite instead, and the building commissioner has not authorized the special permit because of that language. So we
Right.
recommend that you allow the applicant to construct a 1-bedroom unit rather than a 2-bedroom unit, because it's less intense.
She woke up.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
She's been waiting all night.
I wasn't going to say anything about this, but I do represent this applicant.
Thank you.
I've now been here over 2 hours at my applicant's expense. I feel compelled to mention that this special permit said, and this is exactly what it says, there should be a maximum of 24 guest rooms, consisting of 23 1-bedroom rooms and 1 2-bedroom master suite with kitchen and dining amenities. We have 24 units. That's a maximum. They're all 1-bedroom rooms. We just eliminated the 2-bedroom master suite. Now, I will say, I'm not upset with this board. It has nothing to do with this board. It has nothing to do with staff. And I will say that the building inspector did go ahead and issue our permit once he knew that we were coming forward. So I do appreciate that accommodation. However, it's this sort of interpretation and reading of words and looking for ways to just mess people up that's so unnecessary and is making the permitting process in this town a torture.
Especially in town.
It wouldn't even
You can't
have
work in
to-
the
Let
summer.
doing it
Sarah
everywhere.
finish. Will you please let her finish?
In any other town that I'm aware of, when you run into a permitting issue like this, there shall be a maximum of 24 units. We're not over 24. I could see if we had 2 2-bedroom suites, that would be a problem. I just don't know. I've asked 4 or 5 independent people, including people who were in opposition to this project, if they thought that I was wrong about this. And some of them are even here in this room, and they actually agreed with me, and I'm sure they didn't want to. So I just want you to know that. I don't know that there's anything that can be done about it, and this isn't the only instance. But it's a big deal because it costs people time, not so much time in this case, but it also costs money.
Correct.
You know, I've had to deal with it. They're going to either have to pay me or I'm going to have to throw it in. I mean, it's just not right. And it happens all the time, and this is
All
just
the time.
one example. And there are other examples of the bylaw being interpreted in ways that it never was intended to be interpreted, and words being used in ways that they were never intended to be used, and it's just not right. All I have to say.
It's not right, and I agree with you entirely.
So I don't know why I just felt compelled to say that, because it's been bugging me.
That's fine. I'm glad you said something.
Thank you.
It's as simple as that.
I'll make a motion to allow it.
Do we need a vote on this?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Yes, you do, he's not going anywhere.
Find that it doesn't require a public hearing.
And that's the other thing that...
I'll make the motion, I'll make that first. It does not require a public hearing.
All right, we can break it into pieces and do it.
Okay, I'll second that.
Motion's made and second for discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, sorry.
That's okay. That's a unanimous vote by this board.
I'll make another motion to, are we making the finding that it's still within the scope of the original?
Of the original decision.
And Carl can vote on this special permit.
Oh, thank you, Carl. You should, I'm sorry.
And it's still
My
within.
apologies. You should be included.
It's still within the scope of the original
Sorry.
decision because it's still a maximum of 24 units.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Discussion on the issue. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Thank you, and I think that will probably reflect and hopefully justify what you just said a few moments ago.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next thing before us at this point is 0803 Sherburne Commons. There's a wish to amend the ancillary accessory use, so Leslie?
Oh, well, Mr. Chairman,
I'm so sorry.
back to Farrell's for a second.
Oh,
Did you
sorry.
vote to endorse the plans?
I'll make a motion to
I'm
endorse
sorry.
the plans.
Thank you for reminding me
Oh.
about that.
Okay.
That motion's made, and do I hear a
Second.
second? Motion's made. Seconded, yes, you say, yes, on Ferris as well, too. Sorry about that, Sarah.
Oh, no, it's fine.
So the motion's made and seconded to approve the endorsement of the plans. All those in favor, please say
Aye.
aye. Those opposed, ayes have unanimously. Thank you.
Can Carl sit on this next one?
Special permit on this for Sherburne Commons? No.
Site
Just
plan
site plan
review.
Are you going to invoke the rule of necessity?
I'm not sure why that would involve.
I'm in a butter.
Oh.
There we go.
I'm only separated by a foot, but there is a
Oh,
lot
my
between
God.
us.
Yeah,
But under
yeah,
the
yeah,
MCD or
yeah.
anything else, I'm in a butter.
You're within 300 feet, so.
Oh, my.
So you can invoke the rule of necessity and we're fine, correct?
Or we better continue this till the 12th when we come back to full board.
If we have a full board.
You know,
Well-
Carl won't, I mean, I'm sorry,
Joe.
Joe won't be at the meeting on the 12th.
John hasn't been showing up to any of the meetings, here or elsewhere.
Is there any football? No. It's just a weekend.
So
I'm up.
Yeah.
Hold on for a second. Go ahead, Arthur. What were you going to say?
I just spoke with Chuck, who obviously represents Sherburne Commons, and I represent the hospital, which is involved with this issue.
Okay.
We would like to say that we have no objection whatsoever to Linda sitting on it.
Duly noted.
but he still has to invoke the rule of necessity.
Yeah.
Right, which I'm not feeling, just because people are on vacation right now, doesn't feel like it rises to that level. I hate to say it, and I just did not think about Linda being there at this point. It leaves me feeling very uncomfortable doing it. I don't feel where there's extenuating circumstances where Ms. Williams would be allowed to be invoked on this. See where I'm going?
I have been
It's
on-
just a question of, this is just routinely having some board members, especially Mr. Markinger, not being here at this juncture.
And certainly she has no interest in the project, and there is no, if there were any objection, it would arise from the fact that she is a neighbor and potentially could have some opposition to it. I mean, frankly, both Sherburne Commons and the hospital would really like to get on with this.
I understand. I think maybe if you want to press the issue with me, I might respectfully say, let's hold this over, if we can, hold this over to the 12th and just run it by town council and make sure we're good here. Would that be acceptable? I'm sorry.
Well, it's up to you. I mean, we really, we're really trying to accomplish something here.
I know you are. I know you are. I just want to make sure that we don't run afoul of something that, or at least there's a perception of running afoul of something that's going to basically take everything we do with this and throw it back right down the tubes again. If 10 people decide that this was, that with Ms. Williams, I'd just like to hear town council's
You're
opinion.
really
make
doing
sure.
just technical clarification on this.
I'm respectfully still wanting to get that taken care of. I'm sorry.
Well, I've been on several boards where we've had to invoke the rule of necessity for just this type of situation, because we do anticipate not having more than 3 of us next week either.
Right, this should have been, before we even got to this stage, this should have been flagged out.
Well, who knew that those weren't going to be here?
Well,
John didn't tell her until this afternoon he wasn't coming.
I understand, but nonetheless, I'm sorry. I mean, I didn't see this coming down the pipeline. I really didn't.
Well, I certainly didn't know that Mark Linger and McLaughlin weren't going to be here either. It's not my responsibility.
I think it's just putting us into a precarious situation, and I'm still feeling like that we should just be sure that we're in good graces here. Okay, let me reverse the angle. What's the immediate urgency that this has to be addressed? What am I missing?
Well, I'll let Chuck address that.
We're trying to get the lease is written a certain way. We want to make sure that the lease is written correctly and include the entire space, and so that we can make the changes that need to be made so that they can continue to move in as a doctor's office.
Yep.
There are things that need to be done that are on hold and are waiting so that we can get the final approval so that we can then move forward with the lease and make all this stuff happen. It's holding up the hospital, it's holding up the doctor, it's holding up, our finalizing this. We've already basically got agreement, but we're just asking for an additional $1,400 and $1,407.
Worst comes to worst, Barry, we have to take a vote again at some point.
And also the limitation on no evening.
Office hours.
Evening or weekend. Yeah. And the hospital really needs to have that limitation lifted so that they can, can be used as a medical office, and whenever the doctor needs to be in there to see a patient, it can be that.
Let me just kind of ask Mr. Vorse, who deals with these issues sometimes well beyond, and I know he usually stays current with the law as well too, just for an opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think the rule of necessity applies. I just, under the training that we've had, I don't think that's really possible. I think that if there is no objection to Linda participating and, she states for the record that she's not biased on this matter, then we could take a vote in the future and you could go ahead and vote.
Okay.
But just with the understanding that we will check with town council between now and the 12th if we have to do some confirmatory vote or something.
Okay.
We just may have to. But I don't think the rule of necessity can be done here.
So you're saying we can vote for it, but we may have to reaffirm the
I
vote this
think,
week.
well, we have assurances from the applicant or applicants at this point that they show no problem with Ms. Williams being here to render a decision. So that's a good sign right there. There's no opposition. I'm not hearing opposition from the audience in any way, shape, or form. But I think just the prudency, yes, I think the prudency of running by town council is just good to keep us in touch with things.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen.
What's that form I got to file?
268A.
You have them in the office?
Yep.
Okay. I can, and I'll state for the record that I can vote without bias and impartially. I just have one question.
Yes.
What are the hours, since you're asking to have that waived, what are the hours for people being in the office?
There's just a limitation that was set forth in the modification that you did, which we picked up on when we were reviewing the lease for the hospital and looked at the decision that I believe said no weekend or evening hours. And normally a doctor's office,
5 o'clock.
However, if under unusual circumstances, that's always the way. The doctor will come in late and see a patient if necessary. And we just don't want to have I don't think there's any real reason for there to be any limitation on when the doctor can see the patient.
Okay.
It wouldn't really be an impact on
I don't think that, at the time that was went before the board before, I don't think that the whole thing was fleshed out as to what was going to be happening. Mainly that the hospital is entering into this lease in order to place a medical practice over there that needs a place to go.
Board
Okay,
members, do you
I'll
have
make
any
a-
questions or
I'll-
concerns?
No, I'll make a motion to allow the 1,420 square feet for medical use and lifted from the original decision. Is that the motion, Andrew?
And I think also somewhere embedded in that document is the hours of operation,
There's
which,
nothing stated about hours.
okay.
No weekend or evening, I just don't see that language.
And I don't see us
You want it
inserted.
inserted in it? You want that language
No.
put in?
No.
Oh, removed, I'm sorry.
And you're taking the
Okay.
prohibition on weekend.
Sorry.
You're taking the weekend out also.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
sorry.
All right, so you're all clear on that? You guys are good? All right.
I'll second that.
All right, motion's made, and actually, I'm going to second it if you don't
Okay.
mind, which I think
Can
probably,
you do that?
Yep.
as the chair,
Chairman
I
can
can
second.
No, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no, as a chair, I can
Chairman
second
can
things,
second.
and I
Oh.
just feel a little more comfortable doing that for some odd reason, and I know Ms. Williams will probably allow me to do that.
Mm.
Thank you. Motion's made and seconded for discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say
Aye.
aye.
Will it pass if I abstain?
No,
I
it's
would
a special
suggest,
permit.
I'd suggest with everything we've gone through at this
I'll vote in
point,
favor of it.
I think you
I just
need
needed to be here, so you had three.
No, I understand, but I think it's.
I thought it was, there was a 4. That's why we had all this
No, it's not a
trouble.
special
No.
permit.
Oh, it
It
isn't?
is a
Okay.
special permit, so we need 4.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought you guys said it wasn't
Just
special.
site plan
I thought it was
review.
site
Now
plan.
I'm totally confused.
No, it's site plan review.
Yes, site plan review.
It's a municipal property. Yeah, there's no special permit on this.
Part of a condition of a special permit, correct?
I believe it's,
I think we need 4 votes.
it was a I think you do need 4 votes.
Hang on for a second, so.
Special permit for that was the employee housing.
That's what I think, too.
Yeah, it's only the employee housing that needed the special permit. It was
So-
exempt, it's in a zone, we created a zone for it,
All right, hang on.
Oh, man.
remember?
Hang on.
See that, Kyle? Look how much you're learning.
Yeah, stop.
In a year.
Guys,
Can you hold on for a second and let staff do the review, please?
Sarah's not sleeping. I know I didn't open a new can of nuts.
Good for long meetings. Smokehouse,
This is why it's not.
roasted.
isn't that in a special zone?
Sure.
Yes, and the only thing we had in here was because it was duplex, because we had so many on the same lot.
It's my memory.
Concept from this came in, this was ancillary to the
Right.
Right.
seating community use.
Yep.
Yep.
Right.
But that was
And then it
done,
didn't need a special permit.
right, and that was done without a public hearing,
Right.
so.
Yeah, I kind of remember those pieces.
But I don't remember a special permit on the building itself, congregate building or the cottages. We had a maximum, because I helped write it. We had a maximum units, we had all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah. We set aside the breakaway fence, all that stuff. It's not an OIH, but it's something similar to Andrew.
He's looking it up, just,
We've also since modified this since that was originally.
That's right.
I think it was approved in like 2003.
Right, the modification,
hold on.
Guys,
Listen up.
the modification that we did require a special permit, but that was from the special town meeting in 2009. But the original article was a site plan review. And the action that allowed this was an interpretation by the planning board of that it was still accessory under that original site plan review. The only special permit that's been issued to date on that has been for the employee housing.
so only the three of us can sit.
Okay.
Okay, so in
I'll
that case,
just-
we would need the 3 of you as
Correct.
quorum of the board.
Which is,
And Carl can
right, which is what action we've just undertaken at this
So
point.
all set then,
And,
until next week.
right, till next week, just to confirm everything
Right.
across the board.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's good that
But
we
our-
do that reaffirming stuff. We did a couple of them recently.
that's okay. It's better for us to
Yeah.
practice on the safe side here as well, too.
And just for the board, I mean, and
Yes.
what we do intend to do is to clarify, because right now, the way this, the Academy Hill, which is actually no longer our Island Home, and the ALC Assisted Living Community, we want to use the same language in our Island Home
Agreed.
as ALC,
Agreed.
which allows the accessory residential use right in zoning.
Yeah.
Thank you, and again, I
Thank you.
apologize for my phone.
Ah, no problem.
It's actually the
Frosty
highlight of
Stills
the,
and Nash.
highlight of the
All
evening.
right.
All right.
Little musical interlude. Yeah, musical interlude.
Is, you've got a letter here from Mass Development as well, too. I don't know if there's anything you want to comment on this, but this is more of an FYI type thing. Above that, is there anything other business before this board? Not hearing anything?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Favor. Thank you, everyone.
Now, go up to.
Go home and rest, will you?
God, I had two extreme comments.
Don't be infecting anybody.
Bring them on, Catherine, quickly. I feel a sick day coming on tomorrow.
Can I take what?
Pens.
I will take it if I'm desperate, but I try to take mine first and have it. I just don't like to take. I gave you a pen.
No. Oh, all right. I know.
Well, I'm already concerned.
Where am I going
My
here?
chest.
I'm upside down.
My chest almost like fell apart. Stuff in my chest.
They all have something.
Nat,
You have to cross one of those.
I need to get familiarized with that stuff. Those are the kind of things. Yeah. It does.
these are weird plans. Pen.
I'm gonna go down.
These are weird. Just be careful, I'm only telling you this, I had walking pneumonia for a month in December. Was on 3 weeks worth of antibiotics and a week worth of prednisone. And I just ran into someone else who has walking pneumonia also. Walking pneumonia was very common back in, just before Christmas and between Thanksgiving. A lot of people got it from whatever it was going around.
I've missed all this sickness, so yeah, I know, really.
I mean, I was on a month of stuff, a full month.
Am I doing that one?
Yeah, let Nat do it.
My name on it?
No, talk to him about
All
that.
right, I'll find one that I was, Catherine.
Okay. So if I need to come buy something, I should come buy
Well,
something.
Catherine.